I remember it like it was yesterday. Fresh out of college, my very first adult job as a public school teacher. I had everything figured out. I was going to change the world, one student at a time. During my first 4 years in this particular school district, I quickly realized it's not always the students who need the changing, so to speak. However, at that point, I couldn't figure out what exactly it was that needed to be changed. As I transitioned to another school district and became acclimated with the various courses and programs available from building to building, that is when it hit me like a ton of bricks. It's not always the parents, the students, or even the teachers that need the changing. Most times, it starts with the system. I couldn't figure out how multiple buildings within one single school district had varying levels of opportunity depending on the cluster or zip code in which the student lived. Do me a favor. Imagine with me that you are a freshman about to enter high school. You are so pumped because you plan on becoming a member of the jazz ensemble, the dance team, and because you took honors courses in middle school, you cannot wait to see who will be in your college credit plus classes. However, that excitement quickly comes to an end when you realize that these are not opportunities available at your high school. Those are opportunities available at the other high school, the one down the street. See, the other high school has a state-of-the-art engineering program, updated technology, and a menu of college credit plus courses due to a partnership with the local university. Now, keep in mind, you've done nothing wrong here. This is not the result of a disciplinary infraction or of missing the deadline to sign up to take advantage of these opportunities. What you've just experienced is what I like to refer to as a tale of two clusters. A tale of two clusters are instances in which one single school district has access to various resources, but they are not equitably dispersed from building to building. As such, all students are not provided with the necessary resources to excel holistically. Now, for me, this begs two questions. One, why is there a disparity of resources among clusters in one single school district? And two, what can we do about it? Today, I'd like to borrow a little bit of your time to share with you how we can take a strategic approach to amplifying equity within the school system. Now, before we jump into the weeds of things, we first must understand the meaning of two terms that are used synonymously but are in fact very different. These terms are equality and equity. Webster's dictionary tells us that equality is the state of being equal. Everybody gets the same thing. So in high school A, there are classes, and in high school B, there are classes, not taking rigor or content into consideration. However, the National Equity Project tells us that educational equity means each child gets what they need to develop to their full potential academically and socially. So this means high school A gets college credit plus classes, and high school B gets college credit plus classes, inclusive of rigor and content. Now, the main thing here is that all students get the resources that they need so they can develop and excel holistically. This reminds me of a teacher named Mr. Edwards. Mr. Edwards taught 11th grade social studies, and he had one of the wildest imaginations. He would turn curriculum stories into movies, bring historical figures to life, and one day he had this amazing idea for his students to virtually interview a well-known professional athlete. Now, his plan was to tie the community service of the professional athlete to a lesson surrounding civic engagement. The planning was coming together beautifully, well, except for one thing. Last week, Mr. Edwards' smartboard stopped working. And because of his building's lack of resources, there were no other smartboards available. But Mr. Edwards remembered that the other high school had extra smartboards in their storage. With a glimmer of hope, he and his principal made a few phone calls, but to their dismay, they were told, due to the district policy, all equipment meant for one particular building must stay put. So students missed out on a life-changing event, and no technology was provided, all because of a system that was created not in the best interest of kids. So back to my first question. Why is there a disparity of resources among clusters? From my experience, this is due to a lack of intentionality and awareness. I've been in the rooms where the decision makers will say, let's put this in high school A, that'll be good for them. Or let's put this in high school A, they already have such and such. Meanwhile, over time, high school A gets all the bells and whistles while high school B is simply left to exist. So what can we do about this inequity? This is where the strategic approach comes into play. You have to have a plan, and it starts with establishing a baseline. You'll first want to establish a baseline to determine where you are currently at, as well as hone in on the key areas that will have the most impact on your school district. Baselines can be established through a needs assessment, data review, or equity audit. Regardless of the resource that you use, though, you want to make sure that it is objective. Remember, subjective resources lead to subjective baselines, and you are doomed before you even begin the process. This next point is critical. Take the data from the baseline as it is. Yes, education is complex, but when we are thinking about restructuring and reframing a system, we must take the data as it is. Too many times, when we receive unfavorable data, we tend to create excuses to console the harsh reality of what the data is telling us. I've heard excuses like, that's not my data, or that's the wrong data, or this is my favorite, if it hadn't been for factors 1, 2, and 3, then the data wouldn't look like this. Let me put it in a different perspective. If high school B hadn't been so far away from the local university, they could have access to college credit plus classes too. Ponder that. Would that be a sufficient excuse if your child went to high school B? Exactly. Take the data as it is. So now that we have established our baseline, we are taking the data as it is, we next can hone in on our underlying issues. Think about the trends or the patterns that you notice. Are there preferential factors? Are there subjective elements, say in an honors selection course? Is there a requirement for a historical disciplinary report? Let me tell you about a student named Jamal. When Jamal was in the first grade, he loved everything about learning, from counting numbers to naming planets, and he was so curious. He always asked questions, rather bluntly, but with well intentions. As Jamal got older and entered the 10th grade, his interest in learning decreased while his suspensions increased. His father attempted to enroll him into honors courses, but the requirements were always teacher recommendations and a historical disciplinary report. So despite Jamal's intelligence, these were always barriers for his acceptance. These are your underlying issues. So next, we'll want to look at our root cause. What happened where your underlying issues were able to take form? What if when we looked a little bit deeper into Jamal's historical disciplinary report, we found out that this focused around incidents concerning noncompliance with school rules? Jamal was curious, so he asked questions. But his questions would be sort of like this. Hey, how come they took step 1 instead of step 2? That doesn't make sense. And instead of taking the question as it is, these comments were misconstrued as disrespect, talking out, and breaking school rules. So where do we go from here? Determine a solution based on those aforementioned steps, and research strategies that speak to that underlying issue, and work to find strategies that speak to your root cause. Work to eradicate that root cause. in a lineup. Now, there may be a need to pull an audible, and that's okay. That's when you determine the effectiveness of the implementation. Make the needed adjustments and keep moving. When students receive the necessary access to resources to excel holistically, this increases trust between families and the school system, and the community is able to receive well-equipped graduates for a sustainable society. So what can you do? Glad you asked. Educators, use this approach so you have a system founded on equity in your school district or even your classroom. Non-educators, get involved. Join your local PTA, attend the board meetings, and most importantly, if you recognize a disparity, call it out and advocate for a change. Collectively, this is how we create a system for the Jamals, the Mr. Edwards, and the world. One student at a time. Thank you.